Bit of an odd one today. Good friend of mine, Powers, you remember Powers? He's the guy with all the Jeeps. He issued me a slight challenge thing. Maybe it was a trade. I don't know the actual verbiage. But he sent me many bags of homemade beef jerky. Yeah, and in exchange, he wants me to send him a mug. And since the beef jerky is already here, I should probably get started. And here it is. Okay, this isn't a mug. It's a bucket of dirt. But there's a story behind this bucket of dirt. See this hole? That's in my garden in the backyard. I dug it with my own 2 hands and ever-worsening spine. I filled up this wheelbarrow and several 5-gallon buckets. It was pretty heavy. And if you're looking at that thinking, that wheelbarrow is way too overloaded, you're right. You know who agrees with you? The wheelbarrow. It broke. That's was not good. Also, the shovel broke. How does one break a shovel? Not the handle. No. The blade itself ripped right off. See? Ripped right off. I thought these were supposed to be better shovels. Good handle, though. Handle didn't break. So anyway, there's a lot of it in buckets over here and in my basement. And yeah, I'm sure explaining buckets of dirt wouldn't be very easy to most wives, but my wife probably sees it as the least likely thing to start the house on fire, so she's willing to let it happen. Now turning this bucket of dirt into a mug is going to require some tools. Let me show you. I got kind of a coarse kitchen sieve. Got kind of a finer kitchen sieve. I'm assuming they're for a kitchen. I got them at a grocery store. They're all metal. This is probably like 1/8 inch, and this is thinner. 1/16 maybe? I don't know. I also have like one of these. This is an 80 mesh, which is ultra fine. I don't use this fineness. I mean, you use 80 mesh for like other stuff. I'm not going to use it today. I just wanted to show you it can go even finer. They can go to like 320 mesh and craziness. So I generally do this in 5-gallon buckets, but they aren't clear, and the process takes a while, so I'm going to shorten it for you. Pretend this is in a 5-gallon bucket. I stick it in a sink, and I fill the bucket right to the top with hot water. Then the clay soaks it up, it slakes down, and over the course of a while, I break up the chunks, and I stick my arm in there and mess it around and stuff. Some people break all this into powder to begin with. I don't, because laziness. But most of it's gonna get wet and break down and kind of sink to the bottom. Any chunks, you'll have to mash them up. And things like roots and other fibers tend to float to the surface, and you just kind of pour them off. I've already taken some chunks of this and dumped it into this mason jar. And if I remove the lid, let some light in there, you can see the clay has been settling. If you give it like a day or two, it's only been like an hour, but if you give it a day or two, it'll be very clear, and a lot of the stuff will settle in the bottom. Remember the settlingness, the settling nature of clay in water, because I'm about to ruin it. So let's pretend this is a 5-gallon bucket and I just stir it up. I don't have to do that because it's tiny, so I'm just going to mix. Sorry for the settling, but remember what the settling looks like. So pretend this is another 5-gallon bucket or some other kind of bucket. I would take the clay that I made and pour it through this sieve into the other bucket. There's still some gunk in the bottom. Had this been a 5-gallon bucket, I would fill this back up with water, mix it all up again so it pulls all that out of suspension, and then pour it through again and again and again. Now you might be realizing this is adding a lot of water to the process, but yeah, that's fine. And sometimes I would also run water through this over the top to kind of force it in. Yeah, there, that's better. You can see here, removes the big rocks and stuff, and the fibers and stuff, and I just throw those out, because I don't want them. Then I take this now screened bucket of now brown baby poop colored liquid into another bucket with the finer sieve. It pours through this easier now because it's already settled out a lot of the crap into the bigger sieve. Again, there's some settling, so I would fill that up with water again, splash it around, mix it in, and I would end up with usually a lot of little rocks. They probably don't show up much here because this is a tiny amount of clay, but a lot of smaller rocks. I've been setting those aside just in case I want to mix them back in. Get through the finer sieve into a bucket. In my case, I don't use another 5-gallon bucket or these tiny little cups. I use a huge Tupperware bin because I'm trying to do a bunch of this at a time. When I dump it in, it's mostly water. Like, it's tons of water. But remember, it settles. When it settles, you end up with a clean layer on the top. I siphon that out of the bucket. Then when it gets stops doing that, I'm letting it dry out for a long time. Not dry out, but like not be liquidy. It goes from liquidy to like a clam chowder soup consistency to maybe like a sour cream consistency and eventually a clay consistency. One way to speed that up is to dump this into like a pillowcase. You might have seen that if you watched a video on processing clay by Justin's Makery. I'll link to that down below. Go watch his. It's very interesting. But eventually you end up with something like this. Disgusting looking. But see, it kind of resembles clay. You can smush it, bend it, do the little kid thing where you roll it into coils. It's not a little kid thing. Adults can do that too. Hand building is called. And it's, it feels a lot like Play-Doh, only the surface of it rapidly dries, and everything inside still feels like Play-Doh. I don't know how to describe it. As far as pottery clay goes, it works like absolute garbage. Yeah, not very good. But if you know me, you know I like doing the crappy way. It's almost always more interesting in my opinion. And look, as I'm playing with it, the surface of it's drying out and starting to crack. Don't know what that's all about, but it wasn't doing that right out of the bag. So something about uneven drying, and yeah, it's not great. I'm sure there's plenty I could do to the clay as far as additives go that would improve all the characteristics and all that. But there's only one thing that I was really concerned about when I made this. What temperature can it fire to? Here's the old kind of kiln that I use. I got it for free from a very nice couple, and it uses what's called a cone sitter over there. And these cones, pyrometric cones, they all have numbers on them, ranging from 022, which I don't have, up to 10, which I don't have. It actually goes beyond that scale. I only have up to cone 6. Basically, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is getting colder, and then 01 is like a negative. 01, 02, 03, 04, 05 gets colder and colder and colder. Then the number tells you kind of relative temperature. Although it's not temperature, it's called heat work. So a higher number, 6, requires more heat work than a 5. So they might differ by, say, 50 degrees if they're held at the same amount of time. Or you can put it at a lower temperature for longer and eventually achieve that much heat work. It's really confusing. Higher temperature for a shorter period of time, lower temperature for a longer period of time. And yeah, I can't, it's witchcraft. It's witchcraft. That's all I'm going to say. Don't worry about it. The important thing to remember, though, is like metal and most other things, if you get it too hot, it straight up melts. And you don't want that. You don't want your cup turning into a puddle. If it was like a bowl that just turned into a plate, maybe not so bad, but it doesn't turn into a plate. It turns into sadness, and it ruins your kiln. So I made what's called a test tile. And here it is. Not very exciting looking. It's just a little lump that can hold itself upright, and it's, up. The idea here is you fire it to whatever temperature and see what happens. If it's too hot, if it starts melting, this will start kind of leaning and sagging, or it might even melt on its own. But this was fired to cone 6, one of the cones I have, the hottest cone I have over there. And most importantly, that's what I fire all the other stuff to, because I had been using clay that I just went and bought. And I bought cone 6 clay because, I don't know, it seemed like that's the thing to do. It seems like 5, 6, kind of a sweet spot for mid-fire, where you find a whole bunch of commercial products. And I wanted to make my own because, again, why buy the commercial stuff that works so well when I can do a lot of work for something crummier and not achieve the same result? I might have to rethink that philosophy. But anyway, the point is, it survived cone 6. It didn't melt. Hooray! Hurdle 1 jumped over without tripping. Now about the fact that it throws like garbage. Now to improve its throwing characteristics, I've turned to that for help. This is a lump of porcelain. It's a commercially available porcelain. It's white, because porcelain, and it's designed, I guess, to fire at cone 6 and do good pottery art stuff. I take this and I measure out an equal amount in weight. I measure in weight, roughly. I don't have my scale out here. Close enough. Now, I wedge them together. Mash them. This is where you get all your frustrations out. Wheelbarrow broke. Borrowed wheelbarrow. So I can't just yell at it and leave it broke. I have to fix it. Kind of hard to show proper wedging with such a tiny piece, especially on a table that's really a sheet of plywood sitting on a rocking frame. But the more you mix it, see, it's kind of starting to look more singular color. There we go. I usually do like much larger lumps than this. It's easier to get into a rhythm when the thing is bigger than your hand. Oh! Also helps if your table doesn't move. But hey, there's no lighting where I usually do this. It's not enough for a video. It's more frustrations I can work out in the wedging. Why does my lighting suck? Okay, now it's more one color, and it feels a lot more like a normal clay. Still not quite. You know, it still doesn't work as well as like literally any clay you can buy, but it's not as terrible as the straight backyard clay was. You can also notice the color is slightly different now. This is lighter. See? Because I added white. When you add white paint to brown paint, you get light brown paint. Who would have guessed? Now before I get to making anything with this stuff, I would suggest making a lot more tiles. First off, make a tile, fire it, see what happens. Make a bunch of these actually, and then you'll put different glazes on them and put them through a firing. Here's a picture of some test tiles. They're not very exciting, but they are very necessary. And they're important because sometimes clay and the glazes don't like each other. If one shrinks more than the other, you can get crazing, which is like if you see something that's all crackly, kind of cool. Some people don't like that. There's multiple reasons why not to like that. I think it looks neat. Some people don't think it's food safe, but like, I play with fire. I'm not scared of a crack in my cup. Another problem, oddly enough, unanticipated problem. Here's a test cup I made. Look at all these bubbles and holes. This has some holes on the inside. Like if you tried drinking out of this, you get one of these little bubbles breaking off and you drink a piece of glass. That's no bueno, no good. And what do we do with pottery that we don't like? That's a really tough cup. Very thick base on that one. That'll teach you to give me a glaze failure. Yeah, so anyway, that wasn't clay that I made. That was another commercial clay. Back to wedging though, you may not want to mix it up all super well. Because if you don't mix it up great, you get this kind of effect. See that? You can see little streaks of lighter and darker. That's because I'm lazy and I don't wedge all that well. Yeah, so sometimes laziness works. That's my story and I'm sticking to it. Also, this is burnished, which is kind of cool. When it's leather hard and you're trimming, you can then burnish it. Yeah, it's pretty neat. You know, I only glaze the inside. I also burnish the rim, which is very out of focus. But yeah, okay. Enough of that. Now for the actual making part of this. First, yes, this is a real pottery wheel. I ditched the washing machine. I used it though. I used it for like 6 months. I threw the washing machine. It is now forlornly laying in a dumpster. Although I saved the motor and the speed control and stuff. So yeah, I'll probably use that eventually for something else. I'm not really going to work through exactly what I'm doing here on the wheel, especially because I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm pretty new to this whole pottery thing, and I'm not consistent. You know, I'll go months at a time without doing it. So I'm just kind of like fudging my way through like a tiny little vase. It's called a bud vase. You know, a little thing that's simple, and you give it to someone with a flower, and they're like, look, I made you something, and they're like, oh, that's great. When secretly they're telling themselves it's the thought that counts. It's the thought that counts. Because you just gave them something crummy. And you can't really tell in this video, but I'm spinning the wheel pretty slowly. I'm trying to like throw fast and loose, but keep it from collapsing. So I don't really care so much if this is perfectly symmetrical. I mean, it's just a little throwaway vase. And actually, I was gonna trim it, and I accidentally dropped it. So yeah, so this thing is dead now. But I just wanted to show you that it is possible to make your own clay and then throw it into a shape, even if your clay is kind of crummy and the person doing the throwing is a noob and doesn't really know what he's doing. So there, if I can do this, you can definitely do this, and someone with any talent can really, really do this. You generally fire it twice. Once, I fire once at 04, cone 04. Comes out looking that color, which is kind of sweet. This was a mug that I put some glaze on, and then when I was loading it, I dropped it on the ground and broke the handle off. Made me very upset. Very, very upset. See, this is one I made more recently. See how not terribly thick the base is? Yeah, that's why I'm so upset. I dropped it and broke the handle off. Getting nice, thinner, more consistent walls as well. I'm not bitter. Then you glaze it and you can get different cool effects. This is a homemade clay covered in a white slip, which is like painting it with white clay, kind of like that. And then some glazes, and make bottles you can give to relatives. I'm going to give that one to a relative. This is the one I'm sending to Powers. Cool, huh? I hope he likes it. I'm not going to smash this one with a hammer, thankfully. Unless I have to. So sorry I was kind of quick on the whole making it thing, but I kind of wanted to show the process of making the clay. And eventually I'm going to get into making glazes, because these are all commercial glazes, and I kind of like how this one turned out. But most of them are like, I don't know. Remember, I like doing things the harder way that ends up with crappier results. That's me. Except for this mug. I bought this one. I did not make it. Made by Simon Leach. Nice potter. Go check out his channel too. He has a YouTube channel and a book, and he's like really good. If you want to look at videos of like how to make pottery, like more setup, like for beginners, like instructional, check out Earth Nation Ceramics. That's another YouTube channel. Earth Nation Ceramics, run by Dante. He's pretty funny, but he's a lot less British than Simon Leach. So depending like what you want. So that's all I had today. If you have any more questions or you want to see any more of this kind of stuff, let me know. I will probably get to other things involving metal and potentially a new furnace build / heat treating oven in the future. I've said too much. See ya!